Hello everyone, welcome to Code Prava. I hope you all will be doing very well. So today we will learn how to make a stopwatch using ReactJS, which is again an important project with the perspective of front-end interview. So I'll quickly go to my VS Code where I have created one project with the name of stopwatch, and as you can see, the app.jsx component is rendering one h1 tag which is hello world. So let's start creating the stopwatch. So I'll go to my src directory and I'll create one folder with the name of components. Then inside this component, I'm going to create one file with the name of stopwatch.jsx. And I will quickly create one function-based React component with the name of stopwatch. Now I'll go back to app.js and I'll import stopwatch component. And instead of this h1 hello world, I'm going to render my stopwatch. And yeah, it's working. So we have to now start work in the stopwatch component. So first thing first, I will remove this div and I'll create a div with the class name of container. And then inside this container div, I'm going to create another div with the class name of timer. And here I will display my stopwatch timer. Let's put some dummy value for now here. And then I'm going to create another div with the name of controls. And inside these controls, I'm going to create two buttons. Let's say first one is reset and the second button is start. So as you can see, it's rendering here. And before going into the actual implementation part or the functionality part, I would like to go into the CSS part. Before going into the CSS again, I want a different kind of font for this timer, which will give me a little bit of timer type of look. So I found this font on the Google Fonts, that is VT323, and I'll click on this get font, which is looking like this. And I don't want to download, instead I'll import it into my CSS. So I'll copy this line. I'll go back to my VS Code app.css. I'll paste it here and I will add few CSS into my body tag. And inside my body tag, I'm going to copy and paste this code which is related to font. So as you can see, the font is working here. Also, I would like to bring this content into the center. So I'll say display to flex and I want it to be center from horizontal and vertical as well. So I'll make align items and justify content to center. One thing I would like to change, that is the font weight. I want it to be 700. Then I'm going to work on this container part. So I'll copy the class name and I'm going to paste it here. So in the container, I want to assign the height of 200 pixel and width of 400 pixel. And in order to visualize this height and width, I'm going to put some border. So I'll say border 1 pixel, solid type and of black color. So as you can see, the border is rendering here, but I want the text alignment to center to bring the content into the center. Also, I want a little bit of a rounded type of border. So I'll say border radius of 10 pixel. Cool, it's working. Then I'll go back to my stopwatch. My next element is this div, which is having a class name of timer. So let's work on this timer part. So for timer, we have already set the font. Just I want to increase the font size. So I'll say font size to be 50 pixel. Yep, it is looking better. The next part is controls. So I'm going to work on this control part. I'll say let's consume the 100% width, and then I want display to be flex. As you can see, the buttons have come into the left side. So I'll use justify content to center to bring them into center. But at the same time, I want a little bit of gap between both the buttons. So I'll say gap of 50 pixel. Also, I want a little bit margin from top. So I'll say margin top and let's say 20 pixel. Yeah, it is better. Now we have buttons inside this controls class. So I'll say controls. Inside this controls div, there are two buttons. So I'm going to write some common CSS for these buttons. So I'll assign height and width of 60 pixels. I want the buttons to be rounded. So I'll say border radius 50%. At the same time, I don't want any border. So I'll say border none. Because these are buttons, so I'll say cursor as pointer. Now I'm going to assign some class name to start and reset button. So I'll say start button, and for the reset, I would say reset button. And now in order to bifurcate between start and reset button, I'm going to write some CSS for them. So for start button, I'll say background color, a little bit of lighter green, and the text which is inside this button should be darker green. Also, whenever I hover in this button, I want a different kind of color. So I'll say start button, and when I hover, change the background color to a little darker green side. So as you can see, the hover effect is working on the start button. Similarly, for the reset button, I'm going to write some CSS. I want background color to be a little bit of grayish type, and whenever I hover on this reset button, I want a little more lighter grayish type of color. Let's see, it's working fine for both of the buttons. So now let's go back to our stopwatch component, and we will start on the functionality part. I need to use few state variables, so I'm going to directly import useState hook from the React library. Also, I need useRef and useEffect. I'm going to use these three types of hooks. The first thing I want to track that when my stopwatch is running, the state which will be holding the information that if my stopwatch is running or not. So I'll create one state that is running, and I'll create a setter function as well to set is running state, that is set is running, and initially it will be false because my stopwatch will not be running initially. The second state I want is the elapsed time. I want to know that how much milliseconds or how much time it has been passed since I clicked on the start button, or how much time it has been passed since the stopwatch is running. So I'll create one more state that is elapsed time, and of course a setter function from useState, and initially it will be 0. I want to track one more thing, that is the exact time when the stopwatch was started. So I'll create one reference variable because that is not going to affect our re-rendering part. So simply I can use ref hook for that. So I can create start time ref, and with the use of useRef, and initially it will be 0. Now we have two buttons, that is start and reset. So I'm going to write one function which will be invoked on the click of start button. So let's call this function whenever the click event is happening on the start button. So when I'll click on this button, this function will be invoked, and whenever the start is happening, as I told you, we have to first set that our stopwatch is running. So I'll say set is running to true. The another important thing that we have to set this start time ref, because this is the variable which will store the exact time when the stopwatch was started. So I'll set it start time ref.current, and I want the current exact time. So I'll use date.now, which will return the exact time. So if I click on the start button, this will be invoking, and these two variables will be holding its data. But there is one important state which is going to track how much time has been passed since we have started our stopwatch, and using this state we are actually going to show our data into the timer. So I'll use useEffect hook here, which will be having a dependency on is running, and I'll check if is running means whenever the stopwatch is running, it means someone has clicked. I want to set my elapsed time, and because the time will be increasing, I will be setting it again and again. So I'm going to use setInterval function from JavaScript API, and I want it to be running every 10 milliseconds so that I can update my elapsed time state more accurately, and I'll update it set elapsed time. And as I told you, this will be tracking the time pass, so I can simply calculate it with the difference between current time and the time since stopwatch was started, that is start time ref.current. One more concept to remember here, that we are using setInterval, which is a web API. Inside this useEffect, so we need to clean this up whenever the component is unmounting. So I'm going to create one more ref, which is interval id ref, and initially it's going to be null. Now I want to store the id into this variable, so I can directly use it like this. So this setInterval function will return an id, and I'm going to store into this ref variable. And in order to clean this up, I need to pass this into the return callback. So inside this return statement, I'm going to return one function that is clear interval, and this clear interval needs that ID, so I can easily pass that using this interval ID ref. Let's try to render that elapsed time here, and if I go here and I click on the start button, you can see it is working fine. The elapsed time is increasing with respect to the time since it was started, but this is not the correct format we were expecting for. So what I'll do, I'll create one function, let's say format time, which will accept a parameter that is time, and it will be in milliseconds. So let's say this is returning some data like this, and I'll simply call this function format time with the parameter as elapsed time. Currently we are returning this dummy time, so that's why it's showing here. So let's work on this time part now. So I'll bring out the hours from this time. So I'll use math.floor because I don't want any decimal value, and then I'm going to divide the time by 1000. Dividing this millisecond with the 1000, it will convert it into the seconds, and I'll divide it with 1000 into 60. So that second will be converted into minutes, and in order to convert that minutes into hours, I'll divide it by 60 again. So our time is now converted into hours. There will be few minutes also. So let's take out the minutes from this time. So similarly, I'll do math.floor, and I'm going to divide it with 1000 into 60, which will convert it into minutes. But I don't want the minutes to be exceeding than 60 because that is eventually going to handle in the terms of hours. So I'll use modulus operator and I will do ampersand 60. So we will be always getting those extra minutes, which is exceeding that hour. Similarly with the seconds, I'll do math.flow and I'll divide the time by 1000 and simply I'll do ampersand 60. In case of milliseconds, because the time is already into milliseconds, so I only need the last milliseconds which are not covered into the seconds. So I'll do modulus of 1000, and I don't want to show from 0 to 999. I only want to show that in 2 digits, that is 0 to 99. So I'm going to simply divide it by 10. Now let's use these variables in order to format it. So I'll say minutes, and then I want to show the seconds followed by the milliseconds. So as you can see, it's showing here, and when I click on the start button, it's working. But still it's not very perfect because we want to show at least 2 digits here. So I can use the pad method of JavaScript. So with the hours, I'm going to format it, and that pad method works with the string. I'll use the string class of JavaScript and I'll pass the hours to convert it into the string, and I want to use the pad start function, which is eventually going to append some characters if the length of that string is less than the given length. So I'll say I want a length of 2, and when it is less than 2, append zeros into the start. Similarly, I'll apply this padding to minutes, seconds and milliseconds. And with the save, you can see it's working. Let's just reload this page and let's try to start, and you can see it is working as expected. No flickering is happening into the UI. It's working very smoothly as we wanted. But with this format time function, our stopwatch component has been more messy. So I'm going to create one more directory into this source directory, and I'll call it as utils. Inside this utils, I'm going to create one file that is util.js. I'll cut this code of format time and I'll move it here, and then I'll export it from this file. Now, because we are using the format time here, so I'm going to import that format time function from utils, and it should be working as expected, which is working. There is one problem. If you see here, if I click on the start button again, when the stopwatch is running, it's again starting from 0, which is not an ideal case for a stopwatch. So what I'll do, I will convert this start button into a stop button whenever the stopwatch is running. So how can I do that? I'll go here and I'll cut this button, and I'm going to do a conditional rendering here, and I'll say if is running means if the stopwatch is running, I want to show a stop button here, but if it is not running, show the start button as it is. And I'll just rename this class for the stop button to stop button, so I can write a little bit of more CSS. So I'll quickly grab this stop button class from here, and I'll go to my CSS, and for this stop button, I want the color to be a little reddish. And the text color, I want a darker red. So let's give it a try. I'm starting this stopwatch and it has been converted into a stop button. But again, we have binded the same on start function with this stop. So if I click on this button, it's going to restart it, which is not we want. We want to stop it. So I'll declare one function that is on stop. And whenever I click on this on stop, I just want my set is running to be false. And I'll bind it here that on stop. So let's give it a try. My stopwatch has been started and there is a stop button which has been appeared. If I click on this, it has been stopped. But there is one more problem. If I click on the start button and if I stop it, and if I click on the start again, it's starting from 0. But I want to resume it. This can be a cross question with you, that how will you build the resume functionality into this stopwatch? Because when I click on the stop and I'm clicking on the start, it's starting from 0. So how can we handle this issue? So what we can do, we can come into our on start and we will identify if the stopwatch was already running and it has been stopped and then we want to start it again, or it has been starting from the scratch. So how can we identify that? We can put one if condition that if elapsed time is 0, means in the case of on stop, we are not touching the elapsed time. The elapsed time will be having some value inside it. That is, if elapsed time is 0, it means it is your start from scratch. So I can quickly cut this code and paste it here. But if the elapsed time is not 0, it means you want to resume the stopwatch. So in the case of resume, I don't want my start time to be starting from the current time, which is happening in the case of scratch start. In the case of resume, I want to start it from the current time, but at the same time, I want to preserve my elapsed time. So I'll simply subtract this elapsed time from the current time. So the start time will go elapsed time behind to the current time. So let's give it a try. If I stop it, it's 2 minutes, 3 seconds and 22 milliseconds. And if I start it again, it's starting from there, means it's resuming from there. So this is how we achieve this functionality, but we can do one minor modification here. If you see, the elapsed time is 0 here. So if I simply subtract elapsed time from here, that is going to take no effect, right? And if you see, these both codes are now same. So we don't need if and else case here. I can simply write start time ref.current equals to date.now minus elapsed time. So in the case of scratch start, it will be 0, and in the case of resume, it will be having some value and it will be adjusted according to that. I hope you understand. So let's just try to resume it and it's working. There is one more button that is reset and we have not written any functionality for that. So let's work on this. So whenever I will click on this reset button, I want to reset the stopwatch. So how can I do that? I will simply set the elapsed time to 0. And at the same time, I want to set my start time.current ref, that is the time when it was started, to 0. And let's bind this function with this reset button. And I'll call this on the click event of this button. So I'll say on reset. So if I click on this reset button, it will be a reset. So if I refresh it, so if I click on the start button, I stop it, I can reset, I can restart, I can stop, I can resume. It's working, reset is working. But there is one more problem. So if I click on the start button, the stopwatch is running, but I don't want my reset functionality to be invoked when the stopwatch is actually running. Because if you see, it can misbehave at that time because you have not stopped your clock and your interval is running. At that time, you are setting the time to 0. So this is not an ideal case. What we will do, we will disable this function when the stopwatch is running. So how can we do that? So I can simply add one property that is disabled, and it will be disabled if the stopwatch is running. If you see, it's disabled, but the hover effect is working, which I don't want again because it's showing like it is active somehow. So what I'll do, I will add a dynamic class here. I will say if it is running, then add disabled button class, and if it is not running, add this reset button class. So as you can see here, if I start it, it has been disabled, and if I stop it, it has been active, which will work. And maybe I want a CSS for the disabled button. I just want it to make it grayish, so I'll say background color to be gray. And now if I reset it, it's working, but if I start, it has been disabled. No hover effect is working now, and this is how we want it. So this stopwatch component has been completed. What can we do into the next step? In the next step, when our stopwatch is running, I can replace this reset button as we did in the case of start and stop button. We are doing conditional rendering here. What we can do a conditional rendering with reset and a lap button. So whenever the stopwatch is running, you can add a lap button here, and when the stopwatch is actually running, that lap button will be activated, and if you click on that, that lap should be added here. It means if you want to record any time, you can add that. So this is what I want from you guys to work on, and if you feel that you need help from me, I can create a video on that, how to add a lap and some more feature onto this stopwatch. If you really want me to create that feature for you, do let me know into the comment section. And if you really enjoyed this video, if you really learned from this video, please share it with your friends, give this video a like, and please subscribe to Code Prava. Thanks for watching.